Good morning, everybody. Late morning in Tornado Alley, and we're starting to approach the noon hour here in the eastern U.S. I do think that the threat of a potential tornado outbreak is increasing across portions of the southeastern Great Plains, across the Mid South, Dixie Alley, maybe even the Carolina Piedmont, although the likelihood of that is a little bit lower. But I do think that the severe weather could begin as early as late Friday night across the southeastern Great Plains. A classic mega trough ejection is going to be upon us here. And I want to show you what that looks like there in terms of the upper level temperatures. You can see some of those upper level temperatures exceeding minus 30 degrees Celsius aloft, diving all the way south into North Texas. And a pretty classic mega trough. Look at the southern edge here. A nice bulbous vortex right at the base of the trough just continues to dig. And that's because you have a lot of flow on the backside of the trough, rounding the base of that storm system, causing it to deepen as it exits the Great Plains and moves toward the lower Mississippi River Valley. Most of the forecast models show a surface low developing across the southern plains and then lifting up toward the Great Lakes region potentially, and anywhere along that surface low track just to the south, and especially where the instability is able to maximize just ahead of the bulbous end of that southern trough. I do think that there is a chance of even a tornado outbreak possibly with a setup like this. And look at that trough ejection. You can see a bit of a subtropical connection, not as much as some of the recent troughs. So, not as much of an El Nino type of a personality with this trough, but it definitely does have a lot of flow on the backside of it when it barrels out of the southern Rockies into the southern plains. And usually, when you have an intensifying upper level storm system like this, when it moves out of the southeastern Great Plains and across the south central U.S., that means that the severe weather is even going to be more significant. And the same goes from when you're chasing a hurricane. One that's intensifying when it's making landfall is a lot different than one that's weakening. And for severe weather, there's just a bigger difference between a trough that is amplifying when it ejects out of the southern Rockies and across Tornado Alley. It's a lot more kinematic as well. And look at how that storm system even gains a negative tilt by the time it approaches the southeastern U.S. The trough axis is largely neutral when it moves out of the southeastern Great Plains and into the mid-south, and that's also very favorable for severe weather. And there's your surface low pattern, and there's going to be a narrow stripe of snow also probably on the backside of the system. Right now, a lot of the models are showing that stripe of snow setting up over the western Great Lakes next weekend. Maybe Chicago could get in on the action, but look at that mega squall line that marches very rapidly from west to east across the Mid South, and it could begin as early as late Friday night across eastern Oklahoma, northeastern Texas, moving into portions of western Arkansas. By Saturday morning, many of the current global models have a nice instability axis moving up into western Arkansas. Soundings are classic Dixie Alley rippers out there beginning as early as late night on Friday. And then you get diurnal heating on Saturday, and that's when the Storm Prediction Center has that large 15% risk area covering the lower Mississippi River Valley. You can see that the global models, the 12Z GFS that just came out, obviously supportive of that 15% upgrade. And now I want to dig in a little bit deeper into some of the forecast models. So we're going to start off with the GFS. Then we'll look at the European model. Pretty good agreement between the operational GFS and the European model. And also we got to look at those ensemble forecasts. When you're this far in advance, looking at the ensembles, the averages amongst all those ensemble members will give you an idea of forecast confidence and how much spread, how differing are the solutions amongst those ensemble members. But here it is on Saturday morning. You've got a swath of snow that could be moving through portions of eastern Kansas, possibly to northern Oklahoma, and it's very possible you could have ongoing severe weather too along that front, portions of Arkansas into northeastern Texas as well. There's a surface low in central Missouri. It's going to lift up toward the Great Lakes. Look at this blocking high pressure downstream too, and that's going to be critical because whenever you get this high downstream of a megatrough like this, the squeeze play in between those two features is the southerly low-level jet, and that's what provides the low-level wind shear across multiple states for even the potential of a tornado outbreak. Basically, 6 to 10 tornadoes or more across a region qualifies as a tornado outbreak, so I don't use that term loosely. But it does look like even the GFS is hinting at a little bit of an increased convection area over the Ozarks. So it's possible that basically like Super Tuesday, February 2008. That was the first chase actually with the base vehicle of the Dominator. And this is Saturday, late morning. Look at the dew point streaming northward, mid 60s. They'll probably even be a little bit higher than this. One limiting factor with this setup is kind of a late arrival of the moisture from the western Gulf of Mexico. I could pan up a little bit and you can see those purples down into the Gulf of Mexico. So the moisture does arrive by Saturday late morning, but it's a late arrival. And some of these dew points up where you have the most favorable kinematics up in Arkansas are low 60s, but they're going to be increasing throughout the day, increasing up into the middle and eventually the upper 60s. You're probably going to get a funneling effect of those dew points right up the Mississippi River Valley, too. And look at that sharp Pacific front moving through Texas. That's going to be the focus for supercell initiation. East Texas all the way through Saturday morning, late Friday night into Saturday morning. And then you're going to get those prefrontal confluence lines that develop. But eventually, this front, by the time it reaches the mid south, gains a due north south orientation. That's also as the upper trough gains that north south orientation as well. We'll zoom in on the region of interest down into Texas and look at that Pacific front, basically a dry line, southwest and northeast oriented dry line. Dew points drop into the teens in Dallas behind it by late morning on Saturday. And look at how that front even gains a bit more of a north-south tilt as it starts to move into portions of Arkansas. Nice direct feed into those 70s dew points, a very dry atmosphere right behind this. Honestly, this storm system reminds me a lot more of a La Nina type of a storm system, a progressive high amplitude system moving rapidly west to east across the country. Let me make sure I can fix these speakers too. There we go. I might fix my mic a little bit. Probably was coming in a little bit muffled with my headset. But there's the Pacific front moving out of East Texas, eventually toward Arkansas, Louisiana. And over top of that is a low level jet that's going to increase throughout the day. And already by about noon on Saturday, you're going to be cooking a kilometer above the ground, 50 knots, approaching the Mississippi River Valley. The tail of that 50 knot low level jet down to about the I-20 corridor in northern Louisiana, but even 40 knots down to Alexandria. Nose of that 50 knot jet all the way up into southern Illinois by this time. And so you can kind of use the 0 to 3 kilometer EHIs to approximate the shape of the instability axis by this time by 18Z. Even decent instability up toward Little Rock, but you could definitely see the deeper dew points from far southeastern Texas, central northern Louisiana, and eventually up into the Mississippi River Valley, western Mississippi. And the models are a little bit faster than they were yesterday. So it does look like it pushes that instability east into Mississippi by Saturday peak heating. So this is by 3 p.m. on Saturday. Nice moisture again in kind of the tornado hotspot of the country here across the lower Mississippi River Valley. Very strong wind shear, but I use the global models just to approximate the shape of the instability axis. And I also think that because this is such a large-scale storm system, that we'll probably be talking about more of a bimodal type of a distribution again. You're going to have instability off to the north, less instability, but stronger low-level wind shear as that surface low lifts up toward the Great Lakes region. It could bring some skinny squall line type action, some line segments, maybe some fast-moving low-top supercells. But you can also see a lot greater instability and still strong low-level wind shear, good deep layer wind shear because of that vortex right at the southern bulb of this megatrough. You definitely have a bulb of cold air aloft, cyclonic spin enhanced on the southern edge of that megatrough, and that leads to greater low-level wind shear that coincides with deep instability across the Mid-South. So the latest GFS is definitely looking like a lower Mississippi River Valley, Mississippi, even pushing into Alabama type of an event on Saturday. Here is the maximum parameters hugging the Mississippi-Alabama border. And then that instability doesn't really advance east very effectively, so you're likely going to have that skinny squall line pushing off to the east. And there you can see that cold air aloft, minus 29, minus 30 degrees C. That's your bulb of cold air right at the tip of that trough, and that's why this is such a big Dixie Alley event, as that just barrels through the south central U.S., and eventually into the southeastern U.S. Some of the models are indicating that you might pull some moisture up into the Carolina Piedmont and even the South Carolina Low Country by the time that front arrives Sunday morning into Sunday afternoon. But it's probably going to be one of those skinny squall lines. And there's a lot of low-level wind shear when that happens. You can see here on the GFS. This is by late morning Sunday. You still got a 50 knot low level jet, 60 knot up through the Carolina Piedmont. Does look like this is going to probably bring some decent snow into portions of the Northeast, you'd think, the interior, the mountains up there, but it might even be too warm for that until you get to the cold side of the system. But there you can see where that front would be located. The fast moving squall line will pivot back to the 0Z European model from last night. Look at that low level jet, folks. The upper level storm system gains more of a negative tilt in the European model, and that's why you get a major low level jet squeeze plane between that high pressure upstream. Negatively tilted trough gives you even more vorticity advection upstream of that, and the squeeze play between those two features excites a 70 knot low level jet across multiple states from basically the Carolina Piedmont up through the mid Atlantic, up through portions of the Northeast. Just a fire hose up there. Let's go a little bit earlier too, toward Sunday, about midday. And there you can see where you'd have a north-south oriented Pacific front. Ahead of that, a lot of strong low-level wind shear. Your low-level jet gets up to like 60 to 70 knots just east of that feature. So by this time, Sunday midday, we'll probably see an uptick in severe weather, especially on the southern edge of this line. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a tornado threat down into Florida too, if you can squeeze out enough low-level wind shear. You can see you've got a southwesterly low-level jet of about 45 knots down there in northern Florida. And as I mentioned, this storm system is a little bit less pure El Nino as the recent ones, as the recent rainmakers that we've been chasing, even though one of those is associated with an enhanced risk there near the Houston area. And there's your El Nino, Eastern Tropical Pacific El Nino raging. Here's your warm North Pacific oscillation. And definitely check out our last video, the seasonal forecast for the 2024 tornado season. We take into account all these Pacific Ocean sea surface temperature patterns, largest body of water on the planet located just upstream of North America. And that's why it's such a useful forecast tool. The higher specific heat capacity of such a large body of water causes the ocean to vary more slowly than the overlying atmosphere. And that's why you can use these sea surface temperature patterns to predict how weather is going to evolve downstream. And you've still got a negative PDO or Pacific Decadal oscillation wrapped around a nice north over the western U.S. And that's what it takes to get big severe weather across the central and eastern U.S. is a big trough across western North America. And also you can see this warm Gulf of Mexico down there. That's kind of been a staple of recent years, the warm Gulf. So that should pump a lot of moisture northward too. And because of this El Nino, you're probably going to get an uptick in severe weather as well across the southern U.S., and that's exactly what we expect. Look at that on Saturday morning. You can see where the instability axis is going to be centered on the European model. Around East Texas on Saturday morning, starting to nose up into southeastern Oklahoma. I've got the photographs overlaid here. Not surprising that the photographs are a little bit better on the nose of that instability axis. But really the large size of this thing as you get that bulbous southern periphery of the trough just barreling into the southeastern Great Plains, pumping all that moisture northward. You also get an elevated mix layer or a dry slot in the mid-levels of the atmosphere that's passing over that moisture axis at the low levels. And those are the basics of instability. Let's step forward as we start to get a little surface heating. Look at that, start to nose up toward the Architect, southeastern Oklahoma by late morning Saturday. This is last night's European model, by the way. And we start to get a little bit less instability by midday as you get some cloud cover, a lot of convection up here near the I-20 corridor. Might impede some of the instability lifting up into Arkansas, at least according to the operational GFS. Look at that. And you're starting to just get it basically to wash out a little bit. It's washing out the atmosphere by Saturday evening. So it looks like you get a lot of convection and a lot of cloud cover possible within this zone. This is the 0Z GFS last night. So let's step forward to the 12Z GFS. And it should trend slower with a deeper upper level trough and with greater surface heating too as we get closer to the event. A lot of times with these global models, they'll underdo the surface temperatures and underdo the Cape. And so I just kind of use them to know the general shape of the instability axis. And you can start to see that instability lift northward into the Gulf Coast region too. It's definitely not guaranteed. During the winter, these always have failure scenarios. Look at that photograph there right in the Mississippi River Valley. Little nose of moisture and instability moving northward at about 18Z Saturday. So look at the surface-based Cape axis. And you always get this little tongue of increased Cape that will lift up the Mississippi River Valley too. A little bit less into central Arkansas too. And the northern mode of this system looks a little bit pinched. Your instability doesn't really reach up to the surface low quite as much, but you do get some instability up here into eastern Missouri, into central Illinois by midday Saturday with some surface heating. And then you lose that surface heating as the surface low lifts up towards central Illinois a little bit. There's your 996 low centered near St. Louis. By Saturday, surface low is intensifying, lifting up toward the southern Great Lakes by 0Z. And then the nocturnal portion of this outbreak is going to begin. And I was looking at the ensemble averages, and let me show you this too, which will definitely boost my confidence on this system being a little bit stronger, a greater confidence in some of the recent storm systems. But look at this on Saturday at about midday. This is the ensemble mean from the GFS, and you still have a very large and strong low-level jet from multiple states, all the way down from central Louisiana up toward the lower Great Lakes, really peaking here across where the Ohio River Valley meets up with the central Mississippi River Valley, Kentucky, western Tennessee, nosing up into southern Indiana. That's where a lot of times these winter outbreaks will happen across this region. And the global models do underdo surface temperature a little bit. So this is the GEFS ensemble mean low-level jet position. And you can also look at Cape, surface-based Cape in an ensemble mean sense. It does kind of, some of these ensemble members want to compress the moisture. You kind of have a late arrival of this moisture. So it does look like a lot of the instability is going to be compressed to the south, maybe near the I-20 corridor, possibly as far north as the I-40 corridor. The very nose of that instability axis, though, could reach up to the surface low and get kind of more of a low Cape, high shear type of a scenario. Here's your 500 millibar ensemble mean, classic mega trough. By the time it's exiting the Great Plains, that strongest flow is starting to round the base of the trough and then move over the warm sector. Big increase in those southwesterly winds over the warm sector. Oh. There we are. See that we're still live here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I was originally intending for this to be a Team Dominator member stream too, and I just ended up going live to everybody on here, so I'll keep it ripping. It's easier for me just to look at the models in real time and show you what's happening on here, of course. But I do think that there is a threat, decent threat of a tornado outbreak across the Mid-South, and so does the Storm Prediction Center. Storm Prediction Center has a 15% area on the day 5. There's your day 5 risk. Of course, we got to pop that off to the right. Old school website there a little bit. So there you can see the large 15% on the day 5 outlook by the Storm Prediction Center. That's the southeastern Oklahoma, East Texas, all the way nosing up into western Mississippi and all the way up into central Arkansas. But with it moving a little bit faster, I wouldn't be surprised if this is expanded a little bit to the east. I don't think it'll shift east because I do think by late Friday night, there's a threat of severe weather to develop across southeastern Oklahoma, portions of East Texas. And eventually this, by Saturday night, is going to move into western Mississippi too. But I do think we're going to see that expand off to the east. I wouldn't even be surprised if there's decent severe weather to the east of the Appalachians. But it will be especially interesting once we get a little bit closer to the event. Once we start to look at the NAM model, some of the convective allowing models, I think that we'll see that the global models are underdoing some of the surface temperatures out here for this event. Now I want to show you kind of how this trough shifts to a negative tilt in the European model, at least last night's. It'll be interesting to see what the 12Z runs do as well. So there's your trough Saturday morning. Got to shift this back to the left again. Raw here at Team Dominator Dixie Alley headquarters. And that's on Saturday morning when we might already be chasing an event down here in western Arkansas. Maybe late night Friday night, southeastern Oklahoma to western Arkansas. Subtropical connection down here as well. And then by Sunday morning, you've got this bulbous southern edge of the trough, and you've got this parent vortex a little bit further north, centered over St. Louis. The surface low will be just to the east of that. Now watch this thing get a negative tilt. It basically, this bulbous southern tip of the trough accelerates off to the east. Look at the cold temperatures aloft. And you're reaching minus 30, almost all the way down to Vicksburg, Mississippi. So the southern bulb is going to be moving a little bit faster, and eventually they become aligned in a negatively tilted trough axis as they approach the southeastern U.S. Look at that. Gains that negative tilt, lifting up toward the northeastern U.S. Probably going to be too warm for a lot of the mountain areas for snow. But then once the system moves by, then you'll get that snow moving in. Now look at that, gain that negative tilt. This is on Sunday evening. There's your trough axis now. That parent vort up near the Great Lakes gets aligned on a negatively tilted trough axis. And there's your bulb on the southern edge of that trough. Basically ejects, gains a neutral tilt, and then it catches up and gains that negative tilt. Just as those favorable kinematics and strong wind fields are starting to approach the Carolina Piedmont region. So look at that cold air aloft, just digging into the southeastern U.S. So this is going to be a big event. Even if there's not a ton of chaseable tornadoes, it's going to be a significant event. And you can see a lot of cold air just loaded on the base of the trough. This is midday on Saturday. And it's possible that a lot of the severe weather threat could happen overnight on Saturday night. Sometimes that happens during the winter season too. But look at these temperatures aloft. Minus 31 degrees C, minus 31 C across eastern New Mexico, Texas Panhandle. That's very cold air aloft. And the strongest jet stream sets up where you get those strongest temperature gradients below that level of interest. You can see a lot of diffluence over the target area too downstream. And as we go to 0Z Saturday evening, definitely a megatroph ejection, and we'll probably be on nocturnal tornadoes by this point near the Mississippi River and potentially pushing into central Mississippi by this time. Starting to even gain a near neutral tilt by this time, even by late Saturday night. But this is that vort that kind of wraps around the southern periphery, and then eventually they become neutrally aligned and then aligned on a negatively tilted axis as they get a little closer to the southeastern U.S. Wow. Minus 30 degrees C all the way down to Texarkana, folks. That's big time. And you even start to get these 60s dew points lifting northward across the Carolinas on Sunday. And by 18Z, you even got low 60s dew points streaming northward into central, upstate South Carolina, and across the Carolina Piedmont. You've got this fetch right off the Gulf Stream near 70 dew points moving up ahead of that system. So it's possible that you could even get a skinny squall line that moves through the southeastern U.S., eventually approaching the South Carolina low country on Sunday afternoon. The timing, of course, is still up in the air with these things, but look at that front. Very strong front. And then you got a lot of good dew points down into Florida. Probably will see an uptick of severe weather down there, maybe even a tornado threat. If that low-level jet can hang on, it appears to try at least across northern Florida. Keep getting recommended all this bodybuilding content on YouTube. Previously, it was arm wrestling content. Now it's all bodybuilding content. Should just get recommended pure tornado content. Popping over to the chat here. How's it going, everybody? Hi, Team Dominator members. Yeah, the College Edu page is a good site for models. I'm using pivotalweather.com, actually, which is another good site for these model forecasts. Pivotalweather.com is a good one. We're also developing our own app, too, for visualization and also for our live streams. So definitely stay tuned to the live streams. Brian has something awesome in store for you coming up. But look at that front. You're going to have a skinny squall line right along that front. Cold air wrapping around the backside. Chicago drops below freezing by this time. This will be Sunday. 21Z on Sunday. So look at those cold sub-freezing temperatures wrapping around the backside of that surface low. And you could get a skinny stripe of some decent snow up there, possibly northern Illinois up into Wisconsin, but the exact details of that stripe of snow are also unclear. This is right as the system is going negatively tilted. I am most interested, of course, in the mid-south on Saturday. So let's go to Saturday at about noon. We'll go. Let's look at 0Z across Dixie Alley here and pull some of these soundings. Natchez, Mississippi. Go back to the GFS, latest GFS model 2, 12Z GFS. There you go at 18Z on Saturday. And let's pick a forecast sounding right in the EHI maximum. Right over southeastern Arkansas. A lot of times you get that little arm of decent instability that will surge north near the along the Mississippi River Valley. It's almost like a moat or like a river. Obviously it is a river, but that lower terrain kind of funnels and channels a low-level jet, and you get moisture that'll surge right up it. But I'm going to pick a forecast sounding and a hodograph right from near where that maximum is located, near Vicksburg, of course. And this is really even before the low-level jet rapidly intensifies. This is at midday. You have just a little nub of an elevated mix layer. But you already have a hodograph here that's supportive of tornado potential. Northeast storm motion, 30 knots. It's going to be a little bit more manageable midday on Saturday. But this will become more of a classic Dixie Alley hodograph during the overnight hours too, Saturday night. (73/61). You start to get a little more of a hump-shaped hodograph. Northeast storm motion, accelerating up to about 40 knots. So that's your latest GFS, and just kind of a nub of an elevated mix layer. Too much cloud cover could be a limiting factor with this setup, but whenever you look at the global models this far in advance for the Mid-South during wintertime outbreaks, they underdo the surface temperature, and a lot of times they underdo the moisture transport too. But here you've got a 40-knot southerly low-level jet. Let's take a forecast sounding up here in northwestern Mississippi, and there you get more of a classic Dixie Alley hodograph, but it's kind of north of where you get good instability. You got the green and the red line overlapping there. You get a saturated profile. Still a nicely shaped, look at that hodograph. A lot of wind shear, strong kinematics too. But yeah, right now the global models aren't incredibly timed for a large scale outbreak, but still only takes 6 to 10 tornadoes across a region to qualify as a tornado outbreak. But it does look like your strongest low-level jet nosing right up into the Missouri boot heel area, northeastern Arkansas, kind of these classic zones, nosing up into southern Illinois. There's your strongest wind shear, and your strongest instability is just a little bit south of that. You do get some nosing up there along the Mississippi River, but I wouldn't be surprised if you get greater instability than is forecast, and as we get closer to that event, we'll probably see a nice instability axis lifting up the Mississippi River Valley. But that's a 70-knot low-level jet, eastern Arkansas to southeastern Missouri, even right where the Ohio River meets up with the Mississippi River. Kentucky, strong low-level jet right over top of it. I know there's been a lot of comparisons to December 10 and 11, the Mayfield tornado. But I don't see a ton of similarities with that event. It's possible that we could get a long track tornado, but that event on December 10 and 11, you had a closed low off of Baja, and the parent trough picked up that closed low and kind of yo-yoed it across, yeeted it across the central and eastern U.S., and that one supercell developed right near Little Rock and then just kind of anchored just ahead of that vortex that was getting pulled up to the northeast. But it does look like after sunset, look at that low-level jet covering multiple states here. It's a little bit faster than when the Storm Prediction Center outlook was made, but you've got a nice Pacific front here moving off to the east, and it already looks like you got cellular convection with these little holes in the low-level jet. Still wouldn't be surprised if you have a bimodal distribution, cluster of severe weather off to the north, and then maybe even a cluster off to the south where you get some crater instability, but still some strong wind shear. Let's take a look at some of the forecast soundings here over western Kentucky by Saturday night. The instability is not there, however, so it's possible these are all global models. The instability does get there down south into Mississippi, but you have more of a veered out shear profile. Still supportive of tornadoes, but kind of outruns the instability axis a little bit. You only have these 50s dew points heading northward as far north as western Kentucky, or up near where the Ohio River Valley meets the Mississippi. I think the European model is telling us that the best moisture could be western Tennessee southward, across portions of the Mid-South too. What do you guys think? We're definitely going to be activating storm chase mode, that's for sure. Ooh, Jenna Carter's got the special Team Dominator 1 year edition. I think that's the 1 year subscriber membership edition. That red Team Dominator icon that's coming out. Those are very rare, everybody. I do a lot of these live streams for Team Dominator where we go a little bit more in depth on these forecasts. Angie's got one too. Check it out. Thank you, Angie. I will avoid the beaches and sand. I saw Brandon Kopic got stuck in the sand out there in the Florida Panhandle. So I'll be avoiding those, of course, avoiding the sand. Thank you, Team Dominator members, for joining. We do a lot of these briefings, in-depth analyses, and we'll be doing them all winter long. And we also plan a big live stream for this potential tornado outbreak on Saturday. I think I had a mic issue too when I started this up, so it probably ranked us a little bit lower on the algorithm. Oh, there's Ryan. How's it going, Ryan Argenti? There he is. I'm not as good with the Madden-Julian oscillation, Ryan, but I haven't been tracking it, to be honest, this year. But what Ryan's talking about is basically that upward trend in convection that travels through Kelvin wave action, just propagates around the globe in the tropical and subtropical belts. And it could also impact severe weather frequency across the globe. I imagine that it was favorable this fall across Europe for a longer period of time than here in North America because we've had such a quiet fall out here. A lot of these wispy systems, a lot of rainmakers. It does seem like a lot of the convection has kind of been out there in Europe getting hammered quite a bit. And maybe it's our turn. Maybe the MJO has made it all the way around the globe. Now it's coming around the Pacific. And maybe it looks like just in time for winter and potential wintertime outbreaks could be arriving up here. 30 minutes from Natchez, I see. Polite Chihuahua. Nice profile pic there, too. I was just in Natchez a couple systems ago in the middle of the night. I was thinking about getting some barbecue there, and then that tornado producer crossed the Mississippi River just to the south of us, went live on Facebook to approach that one. Yeah, thank you for being a longtime member, Katsy. Thanks, Gina K. Thanks, everybody. Never stop chasing, everybody. So we got a lot to plan out for this weekend. I'm going to be headed out to Oklahoma, too, for this one. So we're going to be getting a new Team Dominator headquarters operational out there. We're going to try to get the Dominator 2 running. May need to get a new starter box in the Dominator 2. And Dominator 1 is running. We caught it on fire this past spring, though. So Dominator 1 was caught on fire in the back right corner of it. Almost melted. But we're going to move the Dominator 1, Dominator 3, and hopefully Dominator 2 down to our new headquarters. And obviously we'd like to build a new Dominator, kind of shaped like a saucer would be the perfect shape for that Dominator. Then we're not vulnerable from side winds or anything either. But yeah, I would say that this event is definitely nothing to panic about. Looks like Saturday night, though, could get some decent moisture up into Alabama. But to me, it looks like the timing of the system relative to the new moisture isn't quite aligned yet in the models. But that doesn't mean that they won't intensify. There's your front that's surging south. It is a dry line because your front's back here. Cold front is further west of the southern plains, and then it catches up with. So you got a dry line, dew points drop into the teens, and then your main front lags behind a little bit. But it is a Pacific front because the cold front because the temperatures do fall behind it. So we'll call it a pseudo dry line, and then your main cold front lags behind. Let's look at Saturday 15Z near the Arklatex. Quick forecast sounding. Kind of some flat hodographs there. Flat critical angles. You really need kind of a big hump of a low-level jet to make those shallower critical angles work. Front marches to the east, East Texas, Louisiana, pushing east into portions of Arkansas, Gulf of Mexico, dominating down there. So yeah, Storm Prediction Center seems confident Saturday. Decent dew points, strong wind shear, southwesterly winds increasing throughout the day, low-level jet increasing too. So probably be a nocturnal event just because that's what happens during winter. But the timing on the new models, the 12Z models that are coming out, isn't quite as favorable as it could be, but a lot of that can change between now and the event. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully everybody's having a great Tuesday and a great start to your December. And remember those 3 most important words. Never